Hey guys, welcome to Entertainment Talk Nation. This is Rob, and this video, I'm doing my dreaded Mets video. I have dreaded doing this video all week, simply because just a disappointing ending to the season. You know, I didn't expect the Mets to go out and just win the World Series. There were a lot of good teams in the National League, probably a lot better National League teams than American League teams, you know, overall, although Houston looks like the best overall team. But, you know, when you got the Dodgers, you got the Braves, even the Padres, which really they underachieved towards the end of the season, and they woke up just in time while the Mets stood asleep. But towards the end of the season, you know, there were a lot of apparent flaws in the Mets just overall. You know, the bullpen leading to Diaz was rather, I don't want to say it was weak. It was okay. You know, the lineup, again, I felt they had enough power. I felt like they always hit home runs when they needed to. Just the key hits, whether it was a single you needed or a home run you needed, just the key hits were not there from September all the way till the playoffs. They just weren't there. It doesn't, you know, you can criticize the lack of home run power, but if everyone's popping up or grounding out, it doesn't matter what. The Mets just needed hits. It didn't matter what it was. But yeah, I mean, obviously they could use more power if you want to make that argument. I thought the lineup was okay, but I think the weakest part of their lineup was the bottom part. And even though Eduardo Escobar woke up towards the end of the season, I do think, I mean, we'll have to live with him for one more season, but I do think they need an upgrade at third base. But even still, whether you want to criticize they need a bat or a home run bat or not, I think the DH spot and the bottom of the lineup is really what killed them. I don't think it was anything else other than that. Even Marte being out, I don't think should have been as impactful as it was, because one person doesn't make a lineup. It's not to say that it wasn't meaningful to have him in there. Of course it was. I mean, he was having a fantastic season. But with the way the lineup was built, everyone else should still function and do their job without him there. It's really the DH position is where they had holes, catcher, and just that's really where, and let's face it, I think the real, and no one's really talking about this too much, I think where the Mets really screwed up was at the trade deadline. I understand and I respect that they want to keep their young players, and I get that. In fact, I can't really overly criticize them for making the moves they did. I thought Vogelback was decent, but he also faded down the stretch. The whole team faded down the stretch. That's just what it comes down to. They, you know, even if they had gotten a big bopper, you know, in the mid, you know, at the trade deadline, there's no guarantee it would have made a difference. You know what I mean? So it's kind of hard. The team was just flat. The team was flat from September all the way to the end. They were walking. I mean, you get swept by the Cubs. You lose 2 out of 3 to the Washington Nationals, and then you get swept by the Braves, a team that you had a winning record against going into that series. So, you know, it's more than just they needed more power. They needed a better DH. They needed this. Yes, they need those things, but they were surviving without those things for most of the season. When the team collectively just fades away into the abyss, slowly fading away into the abyss for a whole month, you know, that's just how it is sometimes. That's you know, you look at the 2015 team, and in terms of the lineup and even the pitching, this was a better team than that. Overall, this was a better team. And look, that team just, they got hot at the right time. They hit the momentum at the right time. That's really what it's all about. You know, the Braves last year, nobody thought they were as good as they were. I mean, now we all know they're really good because look what they did this year. But they were hot. They got hot at the right time. And they went on a run. And they won the World Series. Sometimes that's just how it is. This team next year can get hot down the stretch. And then, so that's just baseball. But that doesn't mean the team doesn't need improvements. They do, and we're going to go over that. This is probably going to be a long one, so bear with me, and I'll probably cut it into parts just to kind of shorten it up. But look, I think the team is headed in the right direction in terms of the culture, right? This guy comes in, he's willing to make some money, to spend some money, to do whatever it takes to win a championship. And while that's good, I also think a lot of Met fans are kind of being too comfortable spending his money. You know what I mean? Like I hear like, oh, well, Steve comes here, he's going to open the wallet. It's like, look, rich people don't get rich by just blowing their money. I don't know if people know that. So I'm not saying he's going to be a cheapskate, but I don't think he's just going to go out there and blindly spend. You know, he spent a lot of money last year, and I think that there's a lot of money that he's going to have to spend this year just on DeGrom alone. Just on DeGrom alone. If you want to go after DeGrom, you're going to have to pay him either equal or more than what Scherzer's getting paid. And, you know, when you really look at it, I mean, I know we all love DeGrom, we all love Scherzer, but that's almost $100 million that's going to be dedicated to two players who are one is at 35 starting next year, the other one's at 39 years old, and both of them did not look that good down the stretch. I mean, these are things we got to think about. You know, now the free agent class is not all that great this year. You know, I mean, there's some great players out there for sure that I think the Mets should go after, and we're going to go over that in a second. But let's look at the Mets free agents. So you got obviously Jacob deGrom saying he's going to opt out. Carlos Carrasco, I think the Mets should just let him walk. Don't even bother with that. Edwin Diaz, you got to try and sign him back, because I guarantee you the Braves will go after him, because Kenley Jansen is a free agent, and they're not. Even if they keep Kenley Jansen, I don't think they want him as their closer. While he did well against the Mets, he didn't do that great down the stretch. Chris Bassett is an interesting one. So Chris Bassett doesn't seem to me like a big game pitcher. You know, he had a great season. He did a wonderful job, but when it was every time he faced the big teams, he got beat up. And you just don't need that. And then he had a press conference, and I don't remember what he said word for word, so I'm going to paraphrase, but basically he just talked about like the way he spoke about the game he had to pitch against the Padres and it being in New York, and he did not seem like he expressed to me like he was that capable of handling the pressure. And then we saw him perform and it wasn't very good. I would consider letting him walk, or I don't know, maybe give him one more year. I don't know. I'm kind of 6 to 1, half a dozen to the other on Chris Bassett. I think overall they'll bring him back just because he performed so well. And then, you know, you might want to give him a second chance to see how he performs at the end of the season. But we'll see. Trevor May, I like Trevor May. I think you bring Trevor May back. Brandon Nimmo, everybody wants to bring back. I know, I'm not saying no. I think he's very valuable. But considering there's a player out there I want to go after hard body, it may... Well, then again, no. Now that I think about it, yeah, no, bring the Brandon Nimmo back for sure. Taijuan Walker, I'd like to keep. Adam Ottavino, I think he earned a 1-year contract. Tyler Naquin, you let him walk. Seth Lugo, again, I'm 6 to 1, half a dozen to the other on that. I actually feel that way about both of them, but relief pitching is hard to find, and they both did decent enough, you know, so maybe you sign them both. I like Trevor Williams. You got to bring him back for sure. Michael Givens, you know, I guess so. Daniel Vogelbach, you let him go. And Tommy Hunter, I don't think I remember seeing him enough to judge, but I definitely think you let Carrasco go. Chris Bassett, I think I would consider letting him go. I'm not going to lie. I think I would let Chris Bassett go. Carrasco, Bassett, and Vogelbach, yeah, I mean, those guys are free agents, don't bother. But I would definitely prioritize DeGrom and Diaz as the two you have to. That's a must. But here's the thing about DeGrom. The only reason I'm saying bring Jacob deGrom back is a must is for a different reason than anybody else, because I'm going to be very honest. Given a different situation, given a situation where I had younger pitching and a more solid foundation in my pitching core, I would actually consider letting him go. Or I would sign him and guarantee myself to trade him next year's deadline. I know this sounds like sacrilege to Met fans. I know it sounds crazy, but here's why. He's 35 years old. He's injury prone. And while he did pitch well overall, even on that game against the Padres, he did not look like the DeGrom of old. And what's more concerning is that when he came back from the DL, he looked great. And it's only the last couple of starts, like the last 4, and then the playoff game, he did not look good. He did not look good against the Braves. He looked, I mean, 3 runs, 11 strikeouts, 6 innings. That is a good start line for any pitcher, but DeGrom's not any pitcher, right? You need that ace. Scherzer, we got to live with. We just signed him last year. It was a 3-year deal. We're going to have to live with him. So you can only pray that he comes back strong. But DeGrom, do you have to spend that kind of money on him and really put yourself into a corner? Well, right now you have to, because your pitching staff right now is questionable. You don't know what you're going to get from Scherzer now. You're not going to bring Carlos Carrasco back. Taijuan Walker's good, but he's not an ace. You know what I mean? So if you let DeGrom go, obviously you have bigger holes and bigger concerns, because the free agent pitching does not look that strong this year for free agency. The other reason you got to bring DeGrom back is because of the idea or the rumors that the Braves are going to go after him. The last thing you need is DeGrom pitching for the Braves, regardless of whether he's injury prone or not. So for that reason, yes, DeGrom is a priority. But if the situation was different, I would let him go. Is it worth spending another $50 million for a pitcher who's not going to give you 3 or 4 years of consistent performance based on his recent history? You know what I mean? And he's only pitching 6 innings roughly. It's not like he's going out there pitching 7 or 8 innings. 6 innings, that's still 3 innings for the other team to do a lot of damage to your bullpen. And we know the Mets have a tendency not to score for the guy. So given a different situation, I wouldn't sign DeGrom. I'm not going to lie. I know it sounds crazy to people, but you got to think about the future, and you got to think so much further than just the next 2 or 3 years. If you want to have a team that's winning consistency long-term, like the Dodgers or like the Yankees, those are the tough decisions you have to make. And I would make that decision this year if it wasn't for the fact that there are other areas of my pitching that just are not a guarantee right now. And the closest thing you have to a guarantee right now is Jacob DeGrom. So you got to sign him. You got to sign him. And just because you don't want him going to another team in the division, because I guarantee you let him walk, Braves or the Phillies are going to sign him. As a guarantee. So yeah, you got to bring DeGrom back, which sucks because it's going to, and this is if he wants to come back. That's another thing. I get this funny feeling he does not want to come back to the Mets. And I think a lot of, I don't know. I just get this funny vibe from him. Like he does not want to come back. I don't know why. I don't know if it's because it's a personal thing. Like he's like, I want to go to a team that's going to score runs for me so I can pad my stats. I know that sounds crazy, but some players are like that. They won't openly talk about it, of course, but I get a funny vibe from him. Anyway, but be that as it may, you got to sign DeGrom. So you still have Scherzer, DeGrom. That's your best bet. You keep Taijuan Walker. You let Carlos Carrasco go. If you decide to keep Bassett, then you got to fill another hole. I think rather than signing another pitcher, you just put Dave Peterson in. I think he's earned it. Either him or Trevor Williams, one of those two. Put him in that 5th spot. I think both of them have earned a right to be in the starting rotation. Now, if you let Chris Bassett walk, which I'm kind of leaning towards letting him walk, there are some pitchers that you could potentially sign in the offseason to cover his spot. For example, Carlos Rodan has an opt-out. If he does opt out this year, I think you go after him, all right? And you get him into your rotation. He's younger. He's a hard thrower. He's a good pitcher. I think that's one option if he opts out. And there's a lot of other pitchers out there on the free agent market that can fill that 3 or 4 hole, depending. Maybe you bump up Taijuan Walker. He's earned the right to be the 3rd starter. Depends what kind of pitcher you sign. Now, DH is where this needs a lot of work. And not only DH, but also left field. I love Mark Hanna. I'm not saying that Mark Hanna should be. He's still under contract. And I'm not even suggesting he should be traded. I think he still should be in the lineup. I think he still should be on the team. But it's not good enough. We need a power hitting outfielder. And there are 2 players. One is a DH, one is an outfielder that I think the Mets should also prioritize. You got to go after Aaron Judge. You got to do it. You got to back up the truck and get this guy. Can you imagine him hitting behind? Now, I do think the Mets are going to go after him. Do I think they're going to get him? Probably not. I don't think, if you're the Yankees, much like for the Mets, DeGrom for the Mets, if you're the Yankees, you don't let this guy go. But that does not mean that you should not go after him if you're the Mets. He is exactly what you need. He's a good hitter, and he can hit home runs. It's not like he's just a big bopper that's going to strike out all the time. He is a really good hitter. He hits obviously a lot of home runs. It's 62 this year. And can you just imagine him right behind Alonso or in front of Alonso? That would answer and fill up a lot of your questions. And I'm not saying put him at DH. You can have him out there. I mean, your outfield would be Marte, Nimmo, and Judge, right? Then in the infield, you got first baseman, you got Alonso, McNeil at second, and then you get Lindor at short, and then you still have Kana as your fourth outfielder, and then obviously Escobar's at third, and then you still have Guillorme to back them up. Escobar we're gonna have to live with for another year, but I feel confident that he'll come in and have a strong year. I do think 2024 the Mets probably, hopefully by then, they'll just start Beatty from the season. Now the other thing I'm thinking about for DH is, instead of Vogelbach, maybe sign Jock Peterson. He is going to be a free agent. He had 273, had 23 home runs, 74 RBIs, power hitting left-hander. He had like an 870 something OPS. I think he's perfect. And he can still play the outfield if you need him, but I think you keep him at DH. And you can flip-flop between him and Canna, or if you want to go Alvarez, you can go Alvarez, but then you got to sign a catcher, right? So you're going to have Nido, of course. So the question is, do you want Alvarez as your right-handed DH and then backing up Nido? You know what I mean? That probably is the best way to go. That way he can still work on his defense. But the question is, are the Mets going to bring him up finally and give him a full season? You know, I don't know. You know, there's so many different options, but I definitely think Jock Peterson is, you know, not DeGrom. Judge is the dream, and Judge should be heavily pursued. But the Mets will find out really quickly if they have a chance to sign him or not. Beyond that, I think Jock Peterson is definitely your left-handed DH. And then for your right-handed DH, if you decide not to go with Alvarez and you want to leave him for one more year in the minors, then, you know, now you have to sign a catcher, right? I know James McCann, I think, still has one more year. Yeah, he does. I mean, maybe you can trade him. You can't come into next year with McCann and Nido as your platoon catchers. Nido I would keep because I think he's better defensively. I think I would trade McCann, and I would either bring up Alvarez or sign Contreras, who's also a free agent. You could sign him for like 2 years until Alvarez is ready to be your full-time catcher. You know, I mean, the bottom line is there's going to be a lot of players that are on this team this year that are not going to be. I think McCann's definitely gone. I think Carlos Carrasco is not going to be re-signed. I wouldn't be surprised if Chris Bassett's not returning. Tyler Naquin's not going to be here. Vogelbach's not going to be back. Ruff is definitely not going to be back. You know, and if there are any other players I can think of that may not return, I mean, I think Nimmo will. I think the Mets will sign him, and I think Nimmo will return. But don't be surprised if the Mets decide to go hardcore after Judge and think of Judge as replacing Nimmo in center field. And then they decide to keep Canna in left or go with somebody else. I do think Cohen is going to look at this and say, all right, we need to make some major changes. We need more power. Is he going to sacrifice pitching for more power? Well, he may not have a choice if he loses DeGrom. But I think if you manage to get DeGrom back and Scherzer back, that's still a better 1-2 punch than most teams in baseball. And hopefully they both come back motivated to do better, especially Scherzer. But I don't know, man. Scherzer scares me the way he looked in that San Diego game. He just got hammered. But, you know, he's here for 2 more years, so we don't have a choice, you know. In terms of other starting pitcher free agents, I mean, do you want to go back to the well with Noah Syndergaard? Maybe, but I don't think he wants to come back. A lot of the pitchers out there, I mean, Shamanaya is a free agent. Do you go after him? So there's a lot of questions. There may be trades. You know, the Mets might have to part with some of their youth to go out there. I do think they need a hardcore young ace starter. They need to make a trade for, an ace starter from another team, maybe from Tampa or I love Scherzer. I love DeGrom. And I hope they have 2 comeback years, and I hope DeGrom comes back. But you need a young stud in his prime that is a shutdown pitcher, and they need to make a trade for one. And it's probably going to cost them some of their young pitchers or young hitters. Maybe you, instead of putting Dave Peterson in the starting rotation, maybe you made him as a part of a trade package with Mike Vientos. But then again, is Vientos gonna be, because he looked like crap when he came up? He struck out all the time. Beatty looked a little bit better, but I think Beatty's more valuable to the Mets than Vientos is, because they're gonna need a starting baseman in another year, where right now their outfield looks packed, especially if they sign some hitting outfielders. You know what I mean? Alvarez is a must keep, not only because of his talent, but because he's a catcher and he's only 21. He's going to be 21 years old. So, they have Ronnie Mauricio in the minor leagues. They can make him part of a trade chip because Lindor is going to be here forever. So, but the Mets have to do some things, and they also have to get younger. The Braves are a young team, and by the time the Braves' young core hits their prime, the Mets' current young players are going to be in their mid-30s. So that's another thing you got to think about. Alonso is going to be 29 next year. Lindor, I believe, is going to be 29 next year. Same thing with McNeil. I think McNeil's 30 now. So, those are like your 3 core players that perform. Obviously, McNeil won a batting title. Alonso with the home runs and RBIs. Lindor with what he does. Those are your 3 core. The 3 core from the Braves, which are, Michael Harris, Vaughn Grisham, I guess, if he stays up and their everyday starting second baseman, and then Austin Riley, and all those guys, they're all young and they're all signed long term. By the time those guys hit their prime, the Mets core are going to be in their mid-30s. So you got to think about getting younger, right? And I think that's what the Mets were thinking about during the trade deadline, and I get that. But you got to know when to make the call. If your attitude is to win now, which is what the Mets' attitude was, then there should have been a bigger trade at the trade deadline than there was. And there wasn't. They tried to keep their youth, and I'm not saying it cost them, but who knows how things would have played out if they given up Vientos or Beatty or Mauricio, not Alvarez, and gotten a Wilson Contreras, who they might have been able to sign for another 2 years. So there's a lot of different options. This is not a finagling you're going to have to do. I think priority is Jacob DeGrom, and then second priority is going after Judge. I think those are the top 2 priorities in the offseason. And if you can land those 2, then everything else will fall into place. But I do think they need to make a trade for a solid young, or even in his prime, someone in their late 20s, at least in their 30, 31, starting pitcher, a shutdown starting pitcher. And they need to sign Edwin Diaz. So the Mets have a lot of work to do this offseason. And but look, I think they'll get it done. There's a lot of money off the books this year. It's one thing we got to consider. Obviously, Carrasco was getting $12.5 million or so. Robinson Cano's contract's off the books this year. So there's a lot of money off the books this year, but there's also players that you got to play for an increased salary. If you want to bring back Nimmo, you're going to pay him more. If you want to bring back DeGrom, you're going to have to give him equal or better than what Scherzer got. And if you want to bring back Diaz, who was making a little over $10 million last year, you're going to look at least doubling that. So those 3 players alone are going to cost money. And then if you do go after a player like Judge, you're looking at what? $500 million over the next 10 years, like $50 million a year for him. And right now, the Mets already have the leading payroll in baseball. So, But that's it for this video. Overall, look, I still feel confident the team is heading in the right direction with the ownership. This was a disappointing season, but let this be something that the Mets can let motivate them to come back and put on a better performance. Again, they're going to be fighting with the Braves for the foreseeable future. So they gotta think young, and they gotta think, and they gotta make tough decisions. I'll tell you right now, if it wasn't for the current situation the Mets are in with the Max Scherzer contract and all that, if I were the Mets, I wouldn't even. I would swallow my pride and let DeGrom walk, but they can't, because right now their pitching staff or their pitching rotation is already questionable. You know, if you're gonna get that from Scherzer, then you're gonna have to take DeGrom. You know what I mean? I just hate the idea of having two pitchers on my rotation that are towards the end of their career. They're not pitching that great, and they're getting paid like 35% of your payroll. Ugh, it's hard to swallow. But anyway, that's it for this video. Let me know in the comment section what you think. We'll talk more. You know, we'll once the playoffs are over, we'll definitely be doing videos during the off season, see what the Mets are doing, keep up with rumors, things like that, and hope for the best. All right, guys, that's it for this video. This is Rob signing off for E.T.N, where we don't do news, we just talk entertainment. Take it easy.